use them or not from a professional perspective. I was saying when I was talking to Gaia Leaf, our morning keynote, about Vine, how quickly that sort of took off as an advertising medium, and it sounded like it's been a surprise to everyone, including Twitter. But something like that, and all of the also-ran new sort of social platforms that come out there, they all sort of beg the same question, which is, should I use it? So anyway, we're going to discuss this on this panel. So I'm going to ask them to come out, please. Come on out, panelists. Don't be shy. Oh, there they go. Okay. They get the curtain held for them. It's very professional. So our moderator, raise your hand, moderator, is Michoel Ogince. He's the director of, I should have said Ogince. Well, anyway, director of platform and product strategy at Big Fuel. So Michoel, if you don't know him, is kind of one of the guys around town in terms of really getting good feel for social innovation. He's the head of the agency's Innovation Nerve Center. And he evaluates emerging social technologies for global Fortune 500 companies. And he's also a founding and managing partner at Windforce Ventures, a VC firm. So I think he sees the world from many kind of different perspectives, more so than like the typical agency guy. Are you a typical agency guy? No, probably not. So anyway, with that, I will let Michoel please take away the panel. So thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, so super excited to be here. Thanks to all the panelists and everyone joining. I think to kick things off, we'll give the panelists half a minute to introduce themselves, make themselves known, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sarita Bhatt. I'm the Global Strategy Director for Havas Worldwide. We're a global ad agency focusing on social platforms and digital and really driving that throughout our network across over 100 offices worldwide.
I'm Liz Dunnebaum. I'm the social media director at Epix, which is a movie channel, premium, and is a joint venture between MGM, Viacom's Paramount, and Lionsgate.
Hi, I'm Mark Evans. I lead social at Mindshare for North America. Just making sure that strategy and all of our implementation is driven in the kind of appropriate manner for our clients.
Hi, my name is Fahad Khan. I'm the founder and CEO of OnePublic. We are a cross-media digital marketing software company focused on digital presence software solutions.
My name is Sharad Verma. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Piqora. We used to be called Pinfluencer, and we do analytics and marketing for Pinterest, helping brands and retailers understand their presence on Pinterest and run promotions and campaigns.
Okay, great. So I think one thing just to set the stage straight is that the idea of today's panel is to really bring out into the open emerging social networks as opposed to emerging social third-party technologies. And with that in mind, I recently read a statistic released by Altimeter that the average Fortune 500 brand has more than 187 social media accounts. So a new platform comes along. And how do we evaluate that? Just to add to the mix of the 180 plus that that brands are already playing on. So I'll throw it into the panel, and you guys can share with us maybe like 2 or 3 of the main characteristics or features that you look at in the platform or the teams when it comes into the scene and the question comes on, either from yourselves or clients, should we be there or should we not?
I'll hop in, I guess. For me, I think one of the first things I check out is what are the audience demographics? Are there size there? I think that's one of the key things first for me to look at. Furthermore, is there an opportunity to be able to make the brand bigger on this platform? Is it something that has the opportunity to truly be amplified, my messaging? Also, looking at the content that's on the actual platform, is it even right for my brand? There's lots of platforms out there, and it may not be right. I think finally, too, evaluating whether or not branded content is even welcomed maybe in that environment. I think that's key for it to understand. So for me, I try not to hop on everything. It's really about taking the time to understand the audience there and whether or not the brand would fit right from a native perspective.
We're in the business of evaluating platforms ourselves as we expand beyond Pinterest. And one of the things we look at is growth and engagement. Is the network growing? and how engaged is the audience on that network. So for instance, we're looking at Tumblr. We're also beginning to look at this network called Polyvore, which is a fashion platform. And if you look at the engagement on that network, just like anecdotally, if you look at their sets and those images, there's a lot of commenting that is happening, and consumers are interacting with each other a lot. So that, I think that, to me, is a central point of decision making, which is there engagement on that platform? And then, then there's demographics and brand relevance. Certain categories are more relevant for certain networks.
And I'm kind of curious to hear both from Fahad and Sharad about this question related to the evaluation of these emerging platforms. Being that yourselves are a technology play, how much of a factor does a publicly available API come into play for you to start, building on top of it?
So one of the first things is that how marketers, advertisers, and brands, they evaluate emerging companies. I wouldn't call them platforms. What we evaluate is that whether a particular company, where consumers or a consumer web or mobile startup application, whether or not that startup qualifies as a marketing platform or not, right? So that's the important question, because a couple of years ago, Twitter didn't qualify as a marketing platform. It is now. Facebook, in the early days when we started, the social industry in 2007, 2008, Facebook did qualify as a marketing platform because it had the underlying APIs available for developers to build on, to brands to build on, analytics, so on and so forth. So there are many, many things that you need to evaluate. I'll add one more thing to the mix, and that is, as consumer web matures, right, growth is a huge problem for a lot of existing social networks. It is not a very, we saw Tumblr being bought by Yahoo today, right? That's final news today. Tumblr had become a marketing platform, but the reason that they didn't pursue the path of Facebook to be able to, IPO is because there's not a lot of money to be made, right? Facebook's IPO or Facebook's revenue growth in the past 3 years is enormous, but YouTube alone is as bigger as Facebook is. So what we look at is whether or not a particular product qualifies as a marketing platform, and does it have underlying APIs and tools to be able to to enable us to help marketers do something on those platforms.
Got it. Liz and Sarita, curious to know your thoughts, from the perspective of what do you look at? What are the 2 or 3 main factors that you look at in the platforms? Is it different, the same?
I think from my perspective, it's the same. I definitely look at a network to see if it's a right fit for the brand. Not every brand fits in well with every single network, and that's really important. I look at the content that's currently being shared on that channel and try to think of the way that I can kind of bring my brand in seamlessly and not just market to that whole community. And then I look at the demographic as well, because I just came from working at Wonderman on Land Rover. That was a luxury brand. Not every single community is right for that. So, we were going after a very specific demo and had to be really cautious about the kind of channels that we were in.
Right.
Agreed. I think from the agency perspective, it's a combination of all these things from both, technically as the API and the back end, how does it plug into all of the different third parties that we're using, demographics, is the brand relevant? But I think, the other interesting thing is as more brands go into the social space, it becomes that much more crowded. So relevance becomes very important. And does this brand have a differentiator? So you could be one of, 400 alcohol brands on a alcohol platform, but are you differentiated, and how can you differentiate? So if you can't, then is that worth the investment in time in creating a real brand story that's compelling?
Got it. If I could add another factor to the mix, which something that I look at very carefully when evaluating the platforms, especially ones that are just coming out of the gate, Snapchat, and a couple others that I'm looking at right now, is number 1, the team. And number 2, the investors, because if I'm going to put a Fortune 500 brand on that platform, and this is a social network that has a large engagement out of the gate, but has very little backing behind them, engineering team and a team in place to deal with a brand on its platform, then it makes me almost scared and skeptical to put a Fortune 500 brand on there.
Quick question though, if the audience is there, does the money then come? So from a VC perspective, if a platform already has the audience, is it going to find the money then?
I think that's part of the equation that a VC would look at. I think there's many factors that a VC obviously know from experience that a VC looks at when wanting to throw some dollars behind a platform and its future. But that definitely comes into the equation. Cool. So I know Vine's been a topic today, and recently came across I think it's in my tweet feed, a site called brandsonvine.com that someone just put together of a collation of brands playing on Vine.
And funny that they put that together on Tumblr.
So what's your take, fad or future?
Well, again, there's another question of audience, right? So I do not agree with that. The typical media buying and planning thinking is not helpful to evaluate social platforms because it's the same audience. When Facebook or Microsoft and Google are fighting for something, Microsoft is recently fighting for the full YouTube API access so that they can enable their mutual users and customers to have a great YouTube experience on Windows Phone 8, right? So it's the same audience that is using all these tools, but it depends. It's a winner takes all kind of effects that which of the platforms. So everybody's using Facebook. Not everybody is using Twitter. Those who are using Twitter, they're also on Facebook. So it's not the question of audience because you could, if it's just targeting a particular audience, then you can find many other ways to target. It's not the social emerging platforms. They're probably not the best way to target.
I think it's also about targeting the state of mind. I think the users have a different state of mind on Vine relative to Instagram, relative to Facebook. We already know that people don't buy on Facebook, but we know that the purchase intent is much higher on Instagram. We know that people are in the mode to get entertained and consume real-time news on Twitter. So I think the same audience sort of navigates across devices and across networks, but you can reach the same audience in different state of minds in different networks.
I love Vine. I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's a great arrow to add into the quiver of marketing tools for a brand. I think you can be able to look at Vine reminds me of Instagram a couple years ago. As I was saying to you earlier, when I look at my Vine feed, my Instagram feed, I often am like, pictures move, start moving for me, please. But I think for marketers, it's a great tool, along with like an Instagram, to be able to feed into their larger communities, to be able to really, dare I say, continue to humanize the brand. So it's not necessarily about having, loads of followers on your Vine feed. If you have the ability to be able to bring that content into your larger platforms and being able to add that in to be a richer experience from your audiences, I think it succeeds there.
I also think that with Vine, what's interesting, or any sort of newer social platform, is that unlike brands, consumers will take risk and they will try anything. If someone sends them a link, they'll open it and they'll give it a shot. We all probably have at least opened Vine or downloaded the app and tried it. Brands obviously a lot more risk averse, and so I think that's something to consider in terms of figuring out where the brand's role is in that. And if you to your point, a Fortune 500 company, it's a big risk to take. I think that the second piece of it is that whether or not Vine lasts, who knows, and Facebook is coming out with their own sort of video ad unit, et cetera, but the point is that consumers are changing their behavior and going from sharing images to sharing a 6-second video, and that's going to inherently change how we consume content. So whether or not that platform exists, I think we have to pay attention to creating content in that format.
And the thing that I love too, I think about Instagram or Vine, it requires brands to think much harder about their content. They can't just slap on a print ad or something else that isn't genuine to the platform. And they certainly can try to do so, but they're going to fail in engagement. And so I think these type of platforms are really kind of saying to brands, if you really want to engage with me, give me something cool. And I think Vine gives that creativity outlet.
And to tell a story in 6 seconds can either be really difficult or really easy. And I think that challenge is a very big creative challenge that makes our industry very exciting.
Liz?
I like the creative challenge of Vine too. I think it's a really exciting channel. I'm experimenting with it myself. I think that you can really deepen the experience that you give to the people that follow you on Vine, because it's more than just a still image. It's a moving thing, and even though it's just 6 seconds, you can take people behind the scenes. You can show them things that they haven't seen before. I look at what some brands that would be considered like unsexy, like GE, do on Vine, and I'm just like blown away because it's creative genius and it's great, and it really opens their brand up to different people.
It's interesting to hear the agency perspective. I think that's quite remarkable, and it is true that. So from a technology standpoint or from the industry standpoint, companies like Twitter or Facebook, they're not playing or they're not in the play of making Instagram and Vine respectively as marketing platforms yet, because they still have to prove their core platforms, whether they would eventually be helpful to brands. So what they are fighting for is the consumer attention, but it's very interesting to hear the agency perspective, because and reason why it's again attention. So if consumers are using it, because most brands have hopped onto the social media bandwagon. At least they have Facebook pages, right? And a lot of majority of the brands, I'm not talking about high-end brands, but majority of the CPG brands, right? Brands that spend, billions and then they sell for a few dollars, right? They usually suck at new things, right? So if they suck on Facebook, they're not gonna, look good on Vine or Instagram. But that gives an opportunity for innovative brands and agencies to kind of, be in the mix and differentiate or be better. So comparatively, those who'd come up with the right content would be able to make a difference. But for me, to consider Vine and Instagram as a platform, I'm not going to put 2 engineers to build something on that until some baseline indicators are there. For example, if they're making $1 billion in advertising revenues directly, then it's interesting for me, and they have an API to build something on it.
Right.
I agree with Fahad, but only to a certain extent. So I think it's about where the puck is going. There's so much clutter and there's so much noise in established and mature platforms that I think brands should be looking into these early networks, or almost as a way to experiment and then see what works. Back in the Valley, there's a saying called there's a concept of lean startup, which is all about experimentation. So yeah, if you're you don't have to put like 2 engineers and like 10 social media managers to manage Vine. But you could start with a little experiment. If you look at what happened on Pinterest still doesn't have APIs. But like Etsy, Marklout, some of the early brands who actually got on the platform early on killed it, and still killing it. They got millions and millions of followers when there was no noise.
Sure, it works for Etsy, it works for other startups, but it doesn't work for a mass marketer who wants to sell billions of products immediately and reach an audience, right? So that's the difference. And then if the APIs are not there, again, to your question, you're not going to put a 500 Fortune brand there because it's not. Facebook had its problem in 2007, 2008 when analytics were wrong. The insights were not working. So Facebook had to come a long way. Now I think the biggest emerging social network which marketers are not considering is G+, Google+, right? So I mean, they are in the mix, and they're one of the largest players, and Google is shoving everybody with G+, at least forcing them to sign up. But I don't know how it'll play out, because it's a winner takes all. There are tipping effects. It's network economics in play.
I think if you're not going to invest early on, then you'll end up finding yourself that you're spending a lot of paid media to get ahead of other brands. So you experiment with 10 platforms, 9 of them don't work, but one of them that does work gives you that leg up 3 years from now.
Great. So I'm going to jump into Google Plus in a moment, but given and I know this is in everyone's news feeds today, but the Yahoo Tumblr acquisition, as marketers and technologists and professionals who evaluate platforms, how does the acquisition change the way we evaluate Tumblr?
I think for brands that are more risk averse than others, it actually gives a little bit of street cred to it, because brands trust larger platforms like a Google or a Yahoo. So there's that aspect of it. Until there's actual technical platform changes into what you can do on that platform as a brand, I don't think it has much of an effect, and I don't think that will happen for quite a while.
I think for as a technology player, I think for us it becomes more interesting because we are one of the largest Facebook preferred marketing developers, going to be Google engagement developers. It makes sense now to be a Yahoo engagement developer as well. So it gives us, more opportunity. Okay, it's not going to go anywhere. We know where it's going to go. It's going to be in the ad tech space, and Yahoo's going to back it up, and the Yahoo ad sales team is going to be behind selling ads there. So it's a good thing.
Yep, great. So, and speaking of the ads, one thing I'm excited about in Tumblr and the acquisition is the opportunity to not necessarily blast and spam consumers and users, but the right ad to the right consumer at the right time is very interesting. And I think to date, Tumblr, if I'm not mistaken, only has one official API partner for measurement metrics. And I think the Yahoo acquisition could change that also. Once Yahoo starts to put some ads in there, it could create a pool of third-party tools that could measure performance and ROI for brands in Tumblr. Cool. So Pinterest. I was in a discussion this week with a client, and we both concluded that, and it was a lengthy discussion, that Pinterest is too experimental for brands, and perhaps we should be staying away. It's not, Facebook rarely built out two major things. One in their technology, which was, literally a home for brands to play. Call it the tab and call it the newsfeed. And then, secondly, they built agency and brand teams for brands to liaise with and get strategic support and account management. Pinterest has not quite jumped on that bandwagon, and that was our conclusion. What's your take?
If you look at the way things happen...
You've built a Pinterest platform, so I'm going down on this one, right?
we might be competing with Pinterest. No, so I think Pinterest recently launched their lightweight analytics, which is the first step towards helping brands justify advertising dollars. The next step for them, I think, and I know that they're working on an advertising platform. And post-advertising platform will come all the campaign ROI, and they'll build out their brand and agency teams. And Pinterest is a very young network, and they're trying to figure out what they want the ecosystem to do, whether or not they want to own the brand relationships. Every social network is different, and Pinterest primarily so. And so if you compare Facebook or Twitter with Pinterest, on Facebook, if you're not posting anything on your fan page, you're not going to get any engagement. And even with that, you only reach 16% of your audience. Pinterest, like 80% of engagement is actually happening organically. Your site visitors are spending a lot of time online on your website anyway, in curating and pinning, which amplifies through repins and so forth. So like Fab for the longest time did not even have a profile on Pinterest, and they got high single-digit traffic from Pinterest. So it's a different play.
You hit on a point that drives me insane is around analytics, and Pinterest analytics is pretty basic, and I'm so perplexed on why you wouldn't be, if you're going to roll out something that have this sort of size, why you wouldn't have a better analytics platform on there. And that's, for us as marketers, for me to be able to justify anything to my clients, like I need to be able to show, create some benchmarks and show some true activity, and it's like, I can't sell in something if you're not going to help me out here, guys.
Especially given that it links so directly to e-commerce. It's probably more measurable from a sales perspective than most other platforms, and yet that just doesn't exist yet. So I think the way we've been approaching it, generally speaking, is it's a good place to have a presence, like, again, having hundreds of presences, because you want to be there. You want to be able to experiment with it. You want to see what actually engages users in terms of content. But it's not a sales driver, and so it becomes a little bit of a secondary way of trying to actually communicate or grab the attention of a consumer from a strict ROI perspective.
I think you don't necessarily have to have a brand presence on Pinterest to be a part of that channel. I think that you can work, there are so many influencers on Pinterest that have millions of followers, and a brand can easily work with any one of them and get them to see their content. Yes, you will have to pay these people, but your content will still be shared throughout the network, and people will be seeing it at a far greater rate than me as a brand trying to build a page and build followers and get it organically out there. It's another avenue to explore.
It also, I think, depends on topic, right? So for a brand that's related to food and recipes, or a brand that's related to fashion and wedding dresses, et cetera, those are great sort of verticals for Pinterest. But maybe a B2B financial institution, not so much.
Or auto, as we found out with Land Rover.
By the way, we see very strong purchase intent from Pinterest. And there's been a lot of studies done, and we've seen revenue per visit from Pinterest to be $1.50 as compared to revenue per visit from Facebook, which is 90 cents, as compared to revenue per visit from search, which is $1.15. And if you think about why Pinterest delivers such high purchase intent traffic, is because consumers, when they choose to select one image in the sea of visuals and then click again to go to the website, that's a very, very qualified click. And Pinterest today added in-stock integration along with price integration, which will further increase the quality of traffic coming out of Pinterest.
Well, I think that's the point, right? Because it is such a directly to sales platform, it would be helpful from the agency marketer side to have those analytics more readily available. I mean, it took Facebook several years to get there, so hopefully Pinterest will.
Okay, so let's jump into the international space. We all work with global brands that have a presence around the world, and often, at least I'm approached, or we as an agency is approached that we want our brand having a presence on an international social network. How do we measure this? How do we even evaluate which are the trending social networks for brands in Southeast Asia or Europe or Russia or South America? I'm stuck.
I think we all are. Well, part of it, I think, is that when you look at it from a global, international perspective, at the end of the day, you have to go back down to the local level, and that's what social really does become more and more about, and it's evolving into much more locally based conversations and content. So what is right for a brand in New York might not be right for that brand even in Ohio, let alone in Shanghai. And so I think local communities are really bolstering what a social network's value is to consumers themselves, and so it does end up actually, interestingly, becomes much more of a local play, I think.
So speaking of international, a couple of things to look at. 2 billion people are online or connected somehow. 7 billion people total in the world. Out of those 2 billion people, so let's look at China. That's 1 billion plus people there. More than China in South Asia, including India, and then other countries around it. Those are English-speaking countries, so to speak, post-British colonial countries, where English is the predominant language or official language of those countries. So there, it's probably the same internet culture as anywhere else. It's Facebook, Twitter, and if you look at Middle East and streets of Mumbai, Karachi, right? It's Twitter, it's Foursquare, it's being used globally in Dubai, right? So the area of the world that I know better, Scandinavia, where I've spent some time going to graduate school. Again, it's the world of Skype, it's the world of Facebook, it's the world of LinkedIn. More conservative on the social side, right? But very much. So I don't know. I think it's going to be at the end of the day Facebook or Google Plus based on how much penetration Android's going to have for the next 5 billion people, right? If they're going to use Android devices and Apple is not going to come up with a world phone or a cheap phone, then it's probably going to be Android and Google Plus. That's the big scary picture for Facebook.
And just to add to that, I also think that it's how people in local markets are using Twitter. So Twitter might be huge in Indonesia and in North America, but how a person is actually using that platform is very different. And I think that's something that brands have to actually, is the sort of foremost consideration. It's kind of like saying, I want a TV ad, from a marketer brand perspective, I want a TV ad that's global. And generally speaking, you have to be very local in order to connect to a person.
I think if the international network is a public taste-based network, if it's a true interest graph, and in talking about Pinterest, if the international audience can influence your buyer through their actions, then it's still a relevant network. And that's what happens on Pinterest a lot. A lot of people are following these international curators who are expressing taste, who are curating these brands, but they're influencing the buyers in the US.
And one thing about China's going to build everything on their own. They have their own Google, they're going to have their own Facebook. So.
Okay, so couple questions to take this home. I've seen a trend, not only in agencies, but also on the brand side, that they're building out innovation departments to really evaluate the explosion and continuous proliferation of social media third-party tools. Do you think we need that also for social networks? Whose job is it to keep up with all the changes on both the brand side and the agency side? All the changes in the current networks that we're on, as well as forthcoming.
I definitely think it's needed. We have at Mindshare, we have a gentleman who handles innovation and meets with VC and it really stays on top of a lot of the new and emerging stuff and works with a lot of our clients to be able to provide them that information, because it can be simply overwhelming, of a task. And so it's often, we partner up with a client and be able to figure out the right roles to be able to make sure that we're kind of looking down the right roads for them in terms of innovative platforms. But I think it's certainly needed.
How do you prevent it from becoming a silo? Like the people in the innovation department going out and doing their innovative things and finding all these cool things, but then having to come back and report into either the social media team or the brand team or whatever it is. How do you bring that all together?
Yeah, well, he really is great about documenting a lot of the conversations he has. He works with a lot of the client teams to really understand the needs that they have. So a lot of his conversations are really driven or tied back to a brand itself. So it's really being able to connect with the brand teams, understanding what their needs are, and then being able to connect back with them once he finds things that he feels will be useful for their clients to have a further conversation around.
I also think it's critical to have, yes, a champion who that is partly a big responsibility, but as well an entire team of people. In fact, from an agency, the entire agency's responsibility is to be to understand the actual communications channels that we're trying to sell brands through to clients.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, from a vendor's perspective, I think it's agencies like you guys are doing an awesome job now consolidating stuff where a couple of brands or a couple of teams have different pricing with X vendor, Salesforce Marketing Cloud, and then Oracle and somebody else, right? So and there are a lot of deals that are done directly with brand marketers, right, which are then shoved down to the agency to deal with. So I think from an innovation and change management standpoint, there's what agencies and brand marketers need to understand is there's a 3-year cycle. So for example, what we're building today, the feature set that we're building in any given platform, be it for YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, what we're building today was made available 6 months or a year ago by the underlying platform. So those capabilities got available, or for example, if there's a new feature, Facebook marketing APIs have enabled that today. We're going to start to build tomorrow, and it's going to take 6 months for us to roll that out, right? And then agencies and brands would see that in production a year later. So it's a 3-year cycle. So it's not. So brands and agencies are interested in what's hot today, right? What's hot today was hot for me 1 year ago. So
that's why we call you and say, hey, what's hot?
Yeah. Exactly. But you can't buy today.
Okay. So, and speaking of hot, we've mentioned the primary and well-known social networks. Is there anything that you guys are seeing or know of that's coming out of the woodworks, out of incubators, that no brand has kind of touched yet? Perhaps it's the chat apps. The chat apps are a social network. Kik, Message, like Message Me, like WhatsApp. Place for brands or consumers only?
I mean, I think Kik, they've just released like these Kik cards, so it seems like they're making that play to include brands at some point. And everybody knows that the millennials are all using Kik, so that's obviously going to be very attractive to a lot of brands. Right. I would keep my eye on that one, I think.
We're seeing a rise of the visual web, which is really about images being the focal point of attention. And there are a lot of networks that are emerging around that. So for instance, there's a company called Lavocracy, which recently raised like $11 million from Kleiner Perkins. And they're really about like visual sharing and e-commerce. So they're basically They're basically e-commerce version of Pinterest. Similarly, Vanilla is another company that was raising a lot of money. There's another company called Wish.com. I think what's happening on the web is, as consumers spend a lot of time on touch devices and do lean back browsing on tablets, they want to be able to collect, right? So I think web is becoming more and more like TV. Like you're spending a lot of time just looking, and as part of looking, you want to be able to collect and share. And there are networks that are emerging around those themes. So Pinterest has pioneered the concept of collection, but I think there are other networks that are capitalizing on that and coming up.
Yeah, how I see all these messaging apps is that it's nothing new. This was done before on web, in Yahoo Messenger, dial pad. It's been done. It's a reinvention.
Right.
And it's I think the bigger picture that we need to look at is that there's not enough room for any big player to grow a lot more faster. So internet has come to a standstill to some extent. Right? So 7 years ago or 6 years ago when we started our business, as one of the first Facebook marketing developers in this city, and Facebook themselves, Mark Zuckerberg himself believes that, and everybody believes that Facebook is the next Google, right? But 7 years later, 6 years later, who the next Google is? It's Google. The past 3 years, Google has tripled their revenue. They're $50 billion. It scares me what they've done, right? So and Facebook's revenue growth, it's there. Facebook's revenue is equal to or close to what Google makes from ads on YouTube.
Right.
So there's not enough room for new players to come in and make a dent. So I believe that whatever innovation take holds would actually then be offered by Google. All these apps are not going to be Instagram and Tumblr stories. They're probably not going to be acquired. They're probably going to be replicated by larger players very, very quickly. And I don't think these messaging apps are innovation. They're just a replication of what happened 10 years ago.
I have not seen a single social network getting replicated. I think social graphs are very hard to build. I think, but platforms do have an advantage. And they can acquire some of these early emerging platforms and own those networks. But I think building consumer experiences is a very different play than building technology.
Okay, Kathy, we're up for questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
So, questions? So, okay, wait. I'm going to defer to somebody in the back here. So hold on. I love running in heels. It's so fabulous.
A lot of the social networks kind of overlap each other in features, like specifically geolocation and checking in places. So I wanted to know what you thought the future of was what geo is and how it directly relates to the networks and how that's going to go.
I could take a stab at that. So, I think the check-in is antique. It's history, and I think brands need more than that. But in terms of geo, the one area that I'm very excited and watching very closely is Google Glass. I think that Foursquare would be an amazing either integration or acquisition for Google or Google Glass, and for a brand to target you at the moment in the store, the moment you walk in your eye, is very powerful. So perhaps a connection between wearable devices and geo is a play for the future.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think that with geolocation and mobile becoming your actual phone device being your social network, that everything is actually becoming a lot more niche and becoming a lot more micro. It's less sort of big, wide. I want to put everything on Facebook, but maybe I want to put a few things, or maybe I want to put a few things on my LOL cat social network that I'm a part of, which I'm not. But, I think that everything is becoming we're filtering a lot more onto individual networks, which is an interesting play in terms of what the future is of that integration across.
So, okay, yeah, question over here. Thanks.
Hi, David Kunyan from Always On Advisors. I'm curious, I spent a decade working in the Israeli startup nation economy and have done a lot of deals in Silicon Valley and have watched sort of the New York ecosystem explode. You guys are in the middle of it. I'd be curious how you guys feel about the sort of great success, since this is our sort of week to all get together, the great success of starting high-tech companies in New York and what, especially in your field as it relates to sort of getting your first accounts, getting up to 5 million, getting up to 10 million, how the kind of ecosystem bubbles great ideas to the surface and makes it happen here. I'd be curious your thoughts on that kind of subject.
We're not based out of New York.
Okay, so for me, I think here's the thing. I mean, when I started my company in 2007, it was not a hotbed of VCs in New York. Now it's really hot for VCs to invest in a New York startup now. So I think for us, agencies, I bootstrapped the company, raised a little bit of money later on. I think the agencies are kind of like, if you're able to get in there, for us, agencies have been very helpful in getting our foot in the door with brands and helping us, reach our revenues, and not needing the capital from VCs. But what we lack here, I think, is that VCs here in New York City, their focus is, I don't know where their focus is. I wish that the Silicon Valley VCs were here. The same VCs. And the other thing that's problematic, I think, for New York tech ecosystem today is that since we live in a world of media and advertising and Wall Street here, it's a cutthroat competition. People and startups from experience in Silicon Valley are more collaborative. They're less competitive. Even if they're competing, they would still collaborate. But here it's about hoarding ideas, whatever. So I think that needs to change. But I think New York is the future for tech, especially marketing technology. I don't call it ad tech, but marketing technology, a larger picture. I think it's all happening here.
Hi. Yes, over here. Hi, my name is Adam Chapman, and I'm with Social Media Today. And my question is to give a little bit of background. Are you familiar with the Ribbon Twitter app that came out and left basically within about half an hour? And the idea of in-stream purchases. How much do you think social networks are going to go more towards, away from ads and related like ways of making money, and more towards actually getting into selling things and being a part of the actual purchases as ways to drive further revenue? And will micropayments on these sites actually start producing the kind of numbers that everyone's hoping they're going to eventually?
Well, me?
Anyone.
Go, please. I'll go after you.
I think that what's interesting is that we're sort of kind of evolving out of the sort of V1 version of brands and social, which is just ads, right? And I think that we are going more towards not only sort of e-commerce within the experience and storytelling, et cetera, but I think that what's really interesting is if you look, for example, at luxury, and you see what the luxury marketers have done in using social, using digital, it's actually a lot more where now mass brands are going in terms of making that a part of your brand story versus I'm just going to push an ad at you and expect you to click and purchase. So I think it's becoming increasingly very important. Micropayments are, I think, one of the pieces of that. I think being more sort of engaging with consumers as we as people just learn to filter out more of the sort of advertising.
Yeah, I think I'll just amplify. I totally agree, and I'll amplify that the past 5 years have been about building social presence. It's been the social presence era. The next 5 or 3 years are going to be ads. So it's not going to be, we're not going to jump straight to commerce-heavy stuff immediately in digital. Commerce will come, but I think we need to do a lot of groundwork. There's a lot of, the display advertising needs to die for the commerce to take place on on internet. That's how.
Doesn't think so. That's his bread and butter.
Yeah, I mean, not holding a crystal ball, but kind of going to take a little bit of a different view. I think social commerce to date has to be upfront, failed. And, social media is about real-time, instant gratification. And it's about captivating the fan, the consumer, the audience at that very moment for a split second, and then the consumer moves on. Consumers don't buy like that. They're on Amazon or any other e-commerce site making a decision over a number of minutes, perhaps even more, depending on what the product is. And so, just given our nature of like how we purchase, I'm a little bit, I'm not too sure what the future of social commerce is in terms of buying in-stream. Having said that, recently under NDA, but just recently met with a platform from the West Coast that have already built out a in-stream Twitter purchasing platform, working hand in hand with Twitter. So, it's coming, but I'm not convinced of the ROI on sales through the stream yet.
I think social commerce has to pursue the state of mind. I think social has to be present when the user is ready to buy or has purchase intent. And I think all purchasing activity is actually happening on the website. So we think that the social commerce is actually going to happen on your website. And all the data that is being generated on social networks can be brought to bear towards creating those social commerce experiences. And so I used to be a product manager at Yahoo Search. And in one of the debates we were having, people were saying, hey, let's put games on on Yahoo Search. And people don't play games, right? I mean, on search is an in and out experience. The same thing happened with social commerce, right? You've got Facebook, so let's put malls and let's put buying experiences. Well, people are not on Facebook to buy. So social commerce has failed because of that, but I think it has to be present in the browsing path of purchasers.
I would just rephrase it and say that the attempts of F-commerce and social commerce have failed, but social commerce has not failed because the time for social commerce has not come yet. That's the time has not come. The time for social advertising has come, but 6, 7, 8 months ago, last year at Social Media Insider Summit, by MediaPost, at a panel, I said this, that Facebook has moved away from social ads in their mobile app install ads. So using their mobile advertising, they have surpassed Google in mobile advertising revenues in less than a year through non-social ads. Those are because they're not using your profile or friends' data, they're using your social graph to target ads, but the ads themselves are not social. And a lot more social networks will now come up with ads which won't be social, so that the privacy implication is not there. So I think the next 5 years still will be advertising innovation before it hits commerce. So time has not come for commerce yet. Social commerce.
So I think we have to wrap it up. I'm sorry we can't answer your question, but you guys will hang around and talk to him, hopefully, some of you. So please give these guys a round of applause. Since I'm moderating the next session, I'm going to go backstage and then go up there rather than crawl up on the stage in front of all of you. So this is going to be awkward. Okay, so hold on. Just sing a little music for a minute. Hi, guys. I'm